Hello, this is Nicole, host of Haunted Mid-Atlantic Tales, and this is Season 2, Episode 21. I wanted to say thank you, everyone that's tuning in, and for those that have always been there for me, who have supported me, Nicole Kali, Nicole Sams, McLovin throughout the years, and who I've recently met because you make a difference. And the series has always been about making an impact, an imprint, whether that's in this life or the afterlife. I live in Alexandria, Virginia, on the eastern coast. It's a port city, and it used to be known for its immense African American labor force, as well as Orinoco, or a kind of tobacco, and that was a name given by the local indigenous tribe, the Piscataway. How much do you know about the Mid-Atlantic region? How much do you know about the tribes that live here still? Native American voices and individuals didn't just go away because of colonization. They're still here. This is why we have Orinoco Bay. This is why we call it tobacco. It's why the town is called Manassas, right? And in New York, go down the list: Mannahatta, Canarsie. In Delaware, Lenape. There's legends of spirits that have always guarded the Delaware Bay and the river. And the Chesapeake. Chesapeake is a Native American word. Algonquin. Algonquin are one of the largest confederacies of Native Americans in this area. I visited an old friend from New York City, Tom, in my side of town, Del Rey. And then I walked over to Old Town, the older and more colonial part of Alexandria. Yeah, welcome to Alexandria House Park. It's nice. Which actually predates what we consider the modern United States and the Declaration of Independence. Orinoco Bay is a large inlet where you can stand and you can kind of feel the residual depth and energy of the people who were there before. And then I went to the Carlisle House, where John Carlisle lived, and Edward Braddock, the general, also stayed because it was a hub of political activity at the time. There are at least 4 ghosts that linger at Carlisle House, a museum, and one is a woman, actually, the second wife of the owner of the house. And you could say that karma follows many of the people who participated in colonialism and the spirits that stay behind in these places. I also went to the John Douglas Brown House, and then I ended my tour with the tomb of the female stranger, who I always wanted to call the grave of a woman not forgotten. And I'm going to read the effigy that's on her tomb. I couldn't get close to it, but there was a sense of guardedness and privacy, so I kept going, though I wanted to show how many lives were honored here, and though this is settled colonial land, why it is that Alexandria has such an entrenched supernatural presence, and it ranges from benevolent to often scary. To the memory of a female stranger whose mortal sufferings terminated on the 14th day of October 1816, aged 23 years and 8 months. This stone is placed here by her disconsolate husband, in whose arms she sighed out her latest breath, and who under God did his utmost even to soothe the cold dead ear of death. How loved, how valued once, avails thee not, to whom related, or by whom begot? A heap of dust alone remains of thee, 'Tis all thou art, and all the proud shall be. To him gave all the prophets witness that, through his name whosoever believeth in, him shall receive remission of his sins. Acts 10th chapter, the 43rd verse. And the third section is from an Alexander Pope poem, an elegy to the memory of an unfortunate lady. And evil manifestations, such as the military presences at the Carlisle House, such as the feeling of being watched at Aranaco Bay. And as I was passing by General Robert E. Lee, the Confederate's house on Aranaco Street, I couldn't help but feel as if I wasn't wanted there. Whatever the source was for my uneasiness, I was still happy to be amongst people and being socially distanced across the city that I've lived in for 3 years now, Alexandria. On Halloween, or Samhain, the bridge between worlds, which I've always been eager to walk. That barrier is almost paper thin, and it's Hallows Eve. I think it's a perfect time to get into this edition of Haunted Mid-Atlantic Tales, where we recover DC, Delaware, and more. The Ghosts of Virginia by L.B. Taylor, Jr., Volume 11. Richmond in Central Virginia, Chapter 52, Old Haunts in a New House. The following letter is from Teresa Krickenberger. In 2001, my family moved into a brand new house in Lake Monticello, a few miles east of Charlottesville. From the first, there seemed to be something different. As soon as I walked into the house, I knew I wasn't wanted or alone. I could feel someone looking at me from across the living room and behind the wall. I was so uncomfortable that I had to get out. After our home was completed and we moved in, I would hear someone walking around upstairs, but no one was there. My husband always blamed our boxer, Susie, but it wasn't her. I never told him that she was laying on the floor behind the sofa. I don't know why. On a weekend on the spring of 2002, my husband was downstairs with our two youngest sons. I heard my then 2-year-old coming up the stairs. I called his name, Jaden, twice. He didn't answer. I walked to my doorway. As the step sounds reached the top of the stairs, I popped my head out. The child on the stairs didn't belong to me. He had dirty blonde hair that was in a bowl cut, and had on a cotton drawstring shirt, and by this I mean he had cuffs on his sleeves, and a drawstring at the neck. I was surprised, but not afraid. He went into my boy's room and vanished. Then, I called my husband and told him, and he laughed at me. I saw the boy again a few weeks later, when my youngest son, Tegan, was napping, and I ran upstairs to check him because he hates covers, and I always worried about his being cold. So, when I went to the bathroom, and then to his room, I looked over, and what I saw made my heart sink. The same little boy I'd seen was sitting on the foot of Jaden's bed with his arms resting on the rail of the crib, watching him. That was the only thing that scared me. I went in there, got the baby, and took him downstairs with me. While living there, I'd see a gold ball travel across the yard, 3 or 4 feet above the ground, the same height as the little boy. I would sometimes see this inside as well, in the same area as the child. And this was a common occurrence, and a neighbor confirmed it prior to us moving in. She said she would see the same thing at night from her deck. At one point, I was watching some children for extra money. 2 of the children were in school, and the youngest was 3. And she and my boys were playing in the living room while I cleaned up in the kitchen. I heard them laughing, and then I heard Jaden say, "Give that back, you can't take my car." I thought it was a child fight, but as I crossed the kitchen, all 3 kids were at the bottom of the stairs looking up. When asked what happened, Jaden said a mean lady took his car and went upstairs. I asked him to describe the car, then went upstairs to his room, and that car was sitting in the middle of it. Our dog Susie would sit at the bottom of the stairs looking up. and would at times growl, and the hair of her entire body would stand straight up. Another time, while in the yard, with my kids, I heard an unshod horse running down the road. Now, growing up in Keswick, Virginia, horse country, I know the difference between shoes and no shoes. Shoes clink and clop. No shoes and the sound is hollow and flat. Anyway, I heard it as it approached, came in front of me and then left. The thing is, I never saw the horse. At night I can sometimes smell campfires and hear people talking, but it was more buzz-like and tinny, like it wasn't quite there, distant, but real. You could also hear people walking in the leaves, even when there weren't any. The last big incident was that we have a green Lazy Boy recliner, and I was fixing lunch for the children one day. They were in the living room watching cartoons on the television, and while they waited, I heard a thump, and then a child crying. I ran into the room, and on the floor was a child that I was babysitting. She and my son swore that the chair tore her to the ground. It wasn't much longer after that incident that she and her siblings quit coming to our house. I did a little research into the vicinity and learned that there are 6 or more cemeteries inside the gated area. Most of them are marked by rocks only. There's a rock foundation of a house near one of these graveyards. I once took a photo of a tombstone and it appears to have a face on it. I also learned that Lafayette had an encampment here during the Revolutionary War. Prior to our leaving the area, I found out that several people in the neighborhood had similar experiences to mine. But the veil of secrecy and fear of what people might think kept it airtight. In other words, if people banded together and were more clear about their experiences, then these things could be faced with support and, not shame and ridicule, because, it's really unfortunate that she couldn't lean on her husband and go through that. No one should feel like they're being made fun of because they're having an experience, especially if others are sharing in it. And if you never talk to each other about it, but it's something that you can tell, and if it's built right near a cemetery, I think there's cause to believe that that story might be real. Chapter 79, Southside Virginia Vignettes. A Vanishing Apparition. My wife and daughter did some volunteer work for the Hughes Home for Children on the outskirts of Danville, Virginia, in 1989, an anonymous contributor to the internet wrote a few years ago. They left the Carrington building around 8 p.m. in the dark, arm in arm, heading towards their car. Under the cedar arch, standing on the sidewalk, was John Hughes, dressed nicely, and who stood aside for the ladies to pass. The only problem was that John Hughes had been dead for some time. My daughter could not believe her eyes. Knowing that it was not a flesh and blood man, she swung her umbrella to disappear instantly. Both came home with goosebumps, anxious to tell me what they had seen. When interviewed separately, they told the same story to the same eerie detail. John Hughes is buried beneath a monument to them, about 80 yards from the spot that they were seen. The home is now a Presbyterian home, similar to what it was at that time. I believe that Mr. Hughes was acknowledging their volunteerism and cannot let go of their work as well. Chapter 87, Signs from the Beyond. The Robe. The following letter was sent to the author by Sean Turlington of Columbia, Virginia, near Richmond. This is about my granddad, Carly L. Turlington. He passed away in the early 1990s. He's probably the greatest man I ever knew. I looked up to and respected him more than anyone else. And after he passed, rest in peace, dude, I went out to clean up his old shop. I had tools, woodworking equipment, and just about everything that he could find that he didn't want to throw away, which is a lot. He grew up during the Depression and never wanted to let anything go if it could be repaired and made useful again and loved. There were things packed from that shop from floor to ceiling, and a lot of it had been there since before I was born in 1969. Well, I entered that shop on a mission to pull everything out and take it to the dump if it wasn't needed. Hey! As I stepped through the door, I stopped and I said a prayer to my grandfather. And that's cool. I explained what I was going to do and asked for his understanding and its acceptance. And I always felt deep down that it was something he wanted to do but couldn't bring himself to do. I asked that if he was pleased, he'd give me a sign to let me know that what I was doing was okay. I then went to work. For the last couple of years, he was pretty much confined to the house. When I finished cleaning, sweeping, and dumping, I stepped back into the shop and surveyed all that I had accomplished. I muttered, "Granddad, I hope you're pleased with what I've done." As I turned around, there on one of the workbenches was his robe, folded neatly. How did it get there? I took it into the house and asked my grandmother and my aunt if they had put it out there. Neither of them knew anything about it. I never saw it while I was cleaning up, so where did it come from? Maybe it was a sign. I still have the robe to this day. Every once in a while I put it on, and I think about how much I love them. I also continue to wonder how it got out there in that shop, after I cleaned it all day.
Since I was a little kid, I loved my grandmother. My memories of my grandmother, they fill my heart with joy. She was absolutely my favorite, and I felt like I was my grandmother's favorite. And she had a bunch of grandkids. And she always loved me, and I loved her. It just makes me smile. It just fills my heart with joy.
Some papers or something. It was my grandfather. He was walking towards me. So I stood up tall, and he looked with his eyes open, and he smiled. And we both hugged. And then he said, "Sit down, son." And I sat down, and he told me, "Don't believe what everybody say. You better make that record. It's going to be your biggest record you ever made. Listen to me. It's going to define your career. So do it. I love you."
I was watching some of the people in the room here, and this, whatever it is that touches people on the shoulders, must be moving down the line and touching each of them as they go along. Of course, I have no idea who the spirit might be. I wish I knew who it was, but I have no idea.
Curator Jeff Jerome has heard about the mysterious shoulder tapping many times.
And this is something we really don't talk about. Because the minute you start telling people, suddenly everyone is going to feel someone tapping them. And so we don't want to give anyone ideas when they come through the house that they will be tapped on the shoulder.
Haunted Places, a National Directory by Dennis William Hawk. DC, Hickmans Ghost. The specter of notorious Washington gambler, Colonel Bo Hickman, has been seen standing on the corner where his hotel once stood. He came to DC from Virginia in 1833 and stayed at the same address for 40 years. He died penniless in 1873 and was buried in a pauper's field, but his friends got together and decided to move his body to the prestigious Congressional Cemetery. After getting drunk one night, they headed for his grave and came upon robbers who had the colonel's half-exposed body sticking out of the ground. Disrespect. They frightened away the grave robbers and tossed the gambler's tattered body into the back of a wagon. The wagon raced down G Street and to the gates of the Congressional Cemetery, where the motley crew, not the band, dug a hole and plopped in the remains of Hickman. The unceremonious transplant seemed to have awakened the spirit of the colonel, who roams the corner from the hotel to this day. White House, the North Portico. The ghost of Anne Surratt, Confederate, can be seen pounding on the doors of the White House, pleading for the release of her mother. Mary Surratt was executed in 1865 for her part in the conspiracy to assassinate President Lincoln. Delaware, Brandywine Creek. A werewolf, or werefox, as the case may be, has been seen slinking through the underbrush along this creek bed, according to legend. Locals call the phantom Red Dog Fox. Sometimes the large fox turns into the form of Jill Thoreau, teenage guide whose father worked for General Lafayette in the Revolutionary War. The scout lived mostly in the wild and still looked like a teenager when he died at the age of 45 back in the 1830s. Brandywine Creek is on the Pennsylvania border with Delaware, 3 miles north of central Wilmington on I-202. The park is 1 mile south of town. The sightings have occurred from the Creek State Park to as far north as Manoir-la-Ray, near Watertown, New York. Maryland, Emmetsburg, Mount St. Mary's College and Seminary. The apparition of Reverend Simon Broutet has been seen following groups of students along the campus sidewalks here. The former college president died in 1839, but a frightening poltergeist haunts room 252 in the residence hall. Several boys and priests have reported an unseen presence that throws furniture and personal items around the room. It is impossible to keep furniture in place in one corner. Unusual electrical problems also plague occupants, but an electromagnetic survey of the room revealed nothing out of the ordinary to them. The college was founded in 1808 and is the oldest independent Catholic college on Turtle Island. Frederick, Auburn. The ghost of Edward McPherson haunted his home for many years, until the door to the stairway was locked to the room. McPherson was killed in 1848 in the Mexican War. Karma. And their loud, stumbling footsteps were heard regularly, until the outside access to the stairs was sealed forever. Frederick is at the intersection of I-70 and I-270, 45 miles from either DC or Baltimore. The Auburn House is a private estate near Frederick. McPherson is buried in Mount Olivet Cemetery. Towson, Hampton Mansion. The chandeliers in this old mansion are said to predict the death of family members. Built between 1783 and 1790, the palatial estate at one time included 7,000 acres of stolen land and was the home of the Ridgely family for 158 years. And according to the legend, whenever the sounds of a crashing chandelier echo throughout the home, a family matriarch dies within hours. Many times, servants and family have heard the shattering sound of one of the huge crystal chandeliers crashing to the floor, only to find nothing amiss. Then the lady of the house soon passes. Although reports of ghosts in the Hampton house are numerous, National Park Service insists, perhaps to a fault, that it is not haunted. But that's what they said about the Carlisle house too. New Jersey, Port Monmouth, the Spy House. The ghostly lady in white descends from the stairs and walks into the blue and white room on the second floor. Once inside, the apparition leans over a non-existent bed or crib and tucks in the covers. Then, she turns slowly away and vanishes. In July 1975, in that same room, a group of visitors saw the lid on the sewing machine pop open and the machine start to operate with no one pumping the foot pedal. An unidentified presence also haunts the entrance room on the first floor, as if it is waiting for someone to arrive. The ghost of a full bearded man with a top hat has been seen in the first floor hallway as well. Although parts of the 2-story wooden house date back to 1648, the main structure was built in the late 1690s by Daniel Seabrook, and the house remained in his family for 250 years. Today, it is considered one of the nation's most haunted places. It is called the Spy House because the British believed someone was spying on their naval operations here in 1778. They even attempted to burn down the house to stop it. However, the real spy was a man named John Stillwell, who lived nearby on Garrett's Hill. New York, Greenburgh, the Brandywine battleground. The ghost of a decapitated soldier, clad in a blue Revolutionary War uniform, has been spotted here, looking for their head, a la Sleepy Hollow. They ride a ghostly horse along the Hudson River at the site of a bloody battle during the War for Independence. Independence for and from whom has always been a question that's haunted me. Most sightings are in the southern Hudson Valley, near the New York and Pennsylvania border, along the Delaware River. New York City, Manhattan, St. Mark's and the Bowery. The first church on the site was built in 1660 by New York's first governor, Peter Stuyvesant. He was buried in a vault here in 1672. The old church was torn down, and another church built on the same spot in 1799. The new church is now home to 4 ghosts, and the apparition of a woman who appears in the center aisle in the middle of the nave. Another woman in a white skirt stands near the rear entrance. A ghostly form has been seen on the balcony as well, next to the organ, and the apparition of a man with a wooden leg and a cane, none other than Peter Stuyvesant. The Bowery was originally the road to their farm, and after they passed away at 80, the ghost was reported to walk on the former property. Today, people who live in the area, tourists, New Yorkers, report seeing their apparitions strolling down the sidewalks of the Bowery toward Cooper Square. This Catholic church is located in Lower Manhattan on the corner of 2nd Avenue and 10th Street on St. Mark's Square. 131 East 10th Street, New York City. North Carolina, Hendersonville, Culpeper Ruins. Hunters in this area and passerby, for centuries now, have reported seeing the dancing ghosts of a couple celebrating their wedding night in the ruins of an old homesteader house. In the 1890s, an elaborate wedding took place here, but the bride passed of scarlet fever just a couple of weeks later, and then their groom of heartbreak. Hendersonville is 20 miles south of Asheville on Highway 176. The basement foundation of the old Culpeper homestead is in the woods off Highway 25. Pennsylvania, New Hope, the Picket House. The ghost of Joseph Pickett, a famous American artist, has haunted the house where he lived since his death in 1918. His apparition is seen in an upstairs bedroom, which used to be their studio. Pickett's ghost has also been reported to walk along a path that runs next to the canal and in front of another brick house a few doors down from where they used to live. That house belonged to their cousin. The building was home to the Living Earth Crafts shop in the late 1970s and is now a private residence near the canal on Mechanic Street, New Hope, Pennsylvania. Like the Muslims say, fuck these fucking fascists. Indian Echo Caverns. The Indian Echo Caverns Park, where the spirit of a Susquehannock Indian holds the head of a bearded white man in the rainbow room of this 5 million-year-old cave. This apparition has been seen by over a dozen witnesses since 1987 at least. Other shadowy forms have been reported in that same chamber. It is believed that the rainbow room was home to evil spirits, so they rarely went into the area. However, the Susquehannock Indians did use the 110-foot wide Indian ballroom for initiation ceremonies and quests, and felt that the good spirits resided at the Crystal Lake, a serene body of water 125 feet underground. The caverns are in southeastern Pennsylvania. You can take the Middletown-Hummelstown exit from either I-80, I-283, or US Highway 322. The site is 1 mile south of Hummelstown. Pittsburgh, the KDKA TV studio. This modern television station is haunted by the ghost of its former facilities director. He died in May 1963 of a sudden heart attack at the age of 50. He apparently left behind a lot of unfinished business because his presence lingers to help out those that took over his job. Late at night, the lights would go on and off at his old office. Others felt a perfectionist spirit guiding them in the daily operation of the station, which is at One Gateway Center, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Haunted Virginia by Pamela K. Kinney. Ghostly Legends and Myths. The Screaming Woman of the Natural Bridge Caverns. There's a story told about the Screaming Woman in the deepest caverns in Virginia. It seems that when a crew was digging into it to get the caverns ready for an attraction in the 1970s, that a woman began screaming not too far away. The men thought that someone was pulling a prank. It was dark, especially when their lanterns would go out easily, becoming so black that you couldn't see your hand move in front of your face. They contacted another group that went in there with them the next day, and of course all heard the woman scream again. The third time that it happened, she screamed right in front of them. Townspeople were told that the crew refused to work there, and of course the body of the woman was never found. Now my husband and I, Pamela, took the tour with the family on Thursday, August 28th in the early 2000s. Our guide, Matthew Hofstetter, led us down into the bowels of the place, pointing out stalactites and stalagmites, Mirror Lake, along with parts of the rock that formed various animals and faces. And there, at the last stop, they told us the legend of the Screaming Woman. Even with the lights, knowing that bats soared high on the ceiling and spiders lurked in the corners, the caverns seem otherworldly, alien in nature, and magnificent. Another take on the story of the Screaming Woman is told by local school children in the area. During the Civil War, a mother took her young daughter into the caverns to escape the cannon and rifle fire. And she wandered away, the daughter. Mother searched for her, but never found her. It's said that the little girl is the Screaming Woman grown up, though the girl's scream is different from a woman's. My husband's take is that it's the woman screaming as she searches for her child, much like La Llorona. As we're heading up to the surface, one of the photos I took did capture a small orb in the caverns. Is this a Screaming Woman's spirit? It's hard to say. Whatever the truth, it is easy to imagine anyone getting lost in the caverns and falling through a hole into another large room. Even falling into the Lost River and drowning in the water. How many bones, how many fools are in another part of the caverns, waiting to be discovered? The source of the scream, we may never know. But if you want to take a tour for yourself, go visit the caverns and tell us what you find. It's been a pleasure to spend this premiere of Haunted Mid-Atlantic Tales with you. It's a really awesome start to the second season, and I hope to have awesome guests, rocking, talking about supernatural things, and really destigmatizing this subject and having fun with it at the same time that we're able to give each other space to grieve and experience these things in our own way and to talk about it in our own way as well. None of us will have the same perspective, but we can all hopefully in some way get together and elaborate on our own. Take care, stay scary, and enjoy your Halloween. From Nicole.